Hi, welcome to this Kickstarter preview video for Dockfighters The Ale Wars. This is an aerial, tactical, miniature game which takes us into an alternate 1948, if I'm not mistaken, where the World War II never happened, but there is another thing going on. It's Germany broken into different states, and there is a lot of friction about the various states that are fighting each other due to the ale industry and ale. Of course, it has to be ale since it's Germany. But that being set aside, the game it's all about fighting, flying your aircraft, flying your airships, flying your bombers, performing missions, trying to bring down your enemy and win fame points, because the pilots of this era are like the superstars, the rock stars, and they're winning by gaining fame points, and fame points you gain them by targeting different things, bringing down aircraft and using those fame points as a currency in the game in order to get better planes, better pilots, better modifications, gain more abilities and become better overall. So the game has a lot of value. This is a prototype material and this is now on Kickstarter, so you'll see the campaign and hopefully it's something that you're going to enjoy. Myself, I have played several games, but I'm not considered an expert by no means on this genre, but I have played games like Wings of Glory, the X-Wing game, also Battlestar Galactica a couple of times, but I think this game, first of all, it's not a sci-fi, it's an alternate, I would say, steampunk universe or whatever. This game has some really cool ideas that I enjoyed. First of all, the altitude. The altitude is something really important in this game because you can fly all the way from level altitude 1 to altitude 5, and that gives you a lot of advantages. The higher you fly, the better, for example, chances to hit your opponent and the more effective you are. It has broad fire arcs, which is really nice because you have possibilities to hit almost always something, but the further away, the lower the possibilities to hit your target. There is different agility patterns, which gives you different, I would say, flexibility. So the lower agility, that means that you can only make a turn at the end of your movement. A high, very high or extreme agility that gives you the ability to make in the beginning, in the middle, and your end movement pattern direction changes, and that gives you, as you would expect, more agility and makes you more efficient. The game has simple ideas, but I think it's all put together to bring a really hefty, I would say satisfying game on the genre, which gives you a lot of action. Now there are a lot of calculations and modifiers on dice rolls, so I suppose someone looking for this video, they're already into it because they know what they're dealing with. They're dealing with dice and lots of modification, but all the modification and all the, I would say, modifiers in general, either they're coming from experience or they're coming from shooting through clouds or shooting from higher altitude or having different more external loadout, etc., and different weapons. They all make sense and they're all easily accessible on the reference cards that they have with all the tables. I didn't show them on the video. I'm not going to show them on the video that I'm going to explain to you now how the game plays, but there are different summary tables that you can have them handy next to you, and then you don't have to remember anything from out of your top of your head, even though it's pretty straightforward, and after a couple of plays it makes sense. So all these modifications really add up to give you a very custom-tailed, modified experience. So the game offers a lot of material, I would say. You can play it as a solo, you can play it up to 4 players, you can play it as a campaign. It has an introductory campaign, it has a versus campaign, it has a solo co-op campaign, it has all sorts of missions. You have a ground targets firing at you, you have waypoints you need to maneuver via. Clouds, weather is really important in the game because the game has 3 phases. You have the movement phase, everything moves, then you have the attack phase, everything attacks, in a simplistic way put, and then you have the weather phase where the clouds of the game, there are acrylic clouds that they move with the direction of the wind, and this can affect both cover or they can even end up damaging the people if the weather breaks into worse weather like a thunderstorm and you're flying into such a cloud, then you have to roll a skill check and you can even take a critical damage. So there is a lot of things going on in the game, but not in an overwhelming way. Everything builds up, everything makes sense, and you start like a green pilot with a lower experience, and then you can become all the way up to the 4th experience level, which is Ace, which gives you access to a specific pool of skills that you can have custom depending on what you rolled and what you selected from your skills. You have differentiation on the different aircraft. You have this huge airship that not only they look cool compared to the smaller aircraft, which they also look nice, they can also take different modifications like turrets and radar and jamming equipment and dogfighters that they can launch from your airship, etc. And all this really for me is an example of a game not only well thought and well designed, but a game that has been injected with so much gameplay that really skyrockets its value. So join me at the table. I'll show you how the game works. I'll show you the basic principles, demonstrate a few things to you and give you some examples, and then I'll come back at the end of this video for my first impressions from the game and what I thought playing Dockfighters The Ale Wars. Hi, welcome to this preview video for Dockfighters The Ale Wars. Dockfighters is an epic air combat game in which the players, referred here as squadron leaders, command and manage pilots and crews as well as their aircrafts, various fighters, fighter bombers, dogfighters, bombers or even large airships, and send them on various missions. You start the game with 4 fighters and their green pilots, but your unit will grow larger in the course of the game and gain more experience. Each squadron leader chooses a suitable mission for his squadron, and both players create a unique playing field on which they try to fulfill their mission. The players don't necessarily have to get in each other's way, and there is a lot of gameplay and a lot of different missions that you can try, but also campaign. What is important, however, is that both players can collect fame points in the course of a mission, whether by completing their own missions or by shooting down enemy aircraft or airships. Here, the more experienced the pilot or crew of the downed aircraft, the more glory the winner gets from shooting it down. In this way, a squadron will accumulate more fame points, which they can spend to buy new pilots and crews as well as planes, airship and new better equipment. In later missions, the squadron will be larger and broader and can receive more dangerous missions or send more pilots and planes to the next objective. The Dogfighters board consists of a hex map. Mission objectives are distributed on the map depending on the mission type and the description of the mission, and they can also be all over the place. The weather also plays an important role in Dogfighters and can change several times during the mission. Clouds made of acrylic, plastic are also placed on the board, and they obstruct the view of sometimes required line of sight in order to have a better chances of hitting the enemy. Clouds can move in different directions across multiple hexes and even damage airplanes and airships, so beware of bad weather and be prepared. It is recommended that new players play the Introductory Campaign first, which shows them the basic games, and then they can move into the more advanced missions. After the Introductory Campaign, you may have a free campaign with full squadron management, solo co-op campaign, also the versus campaign on 1 versus 1. Dogfighters is set in a time where pilots and aircrew are sort of rock stars. They inspire people to do their heroic actions and are stylized as stars in the minds of the people. They are the VIPs of the time and they are portrayed in magazines, postcards and posters. Because of that, each pilot has let's say, an exaggerated ego. It's all about gaining fame during the game, and fame is the currency of Dogfighters. Therefore, almost everything a pilot can achieve during the course of a mission is rated in fame points. With those fame points, you can recruit new pilots, get new planes, and receive more deadly weapons, but also get permission for more dangerous missions. The squadron gains fame by shooting down enemy aircraft or achieving various mission goals, and each shot down aircraft gains fame points according to the victim's, let's say, experience. Just to give you an idea, here is a short table on what fame points you can accumulate from doing various things. So shooting down an aircraft with a green pilot, meaning a newbie, except for Dogfighters, awards you 1 fame point. If you shoot down an aircraft with an experienced pilot, except Dogfighter again, you gain 2 fame points. If you shoot down an aircraft with a veteran pilot, you get 3. And if you shoot down an aircraft with an ace pilot, which is the highest experience one can achieve, except from Dogfighters again, you gain 4 fame points. You also get +1 if you shot down an aircraft which is a bomber, and +2 if you shot down an aircraft which is an airship. And you get let's say, an X amount of fame points by achieving winning conditions depending on the specific mission that you're playing. In Dogfighters, pilots have one of 4 possible experience levels. They always start as inexperienced green pilots and develop into experienced pilots, which are blue, veterans, which are yellow, or even aces, which are red, as their campaign progresses. When a pilot becomes an ace, he can even gain special abilities, making them more deadly than any other. And you can have the various skills that they can achieve, as just an example showing how potential fighter skills for aces can develop. Name and rank are freely selectable by the player and have no influence on the game, and each kill on ground target or enemy aircraft or airship is recorded in the victory track. Stripes, lines or other artistic markings are possible as long as it makes the flying aircraft recognizable, and also shows how many victories the pilot has or the crew has achieved. 1 kill, 1 marking. After each completed mission, a box will be marked on the left side of the flown missions and experience. The next unchecked box is the pilot's experience level, with which he can start the next mission. After the first flown mission, a pilot would mark off the first green box. He will still be green pilot, but not as green as before. After 2 flown missions, a pilot would fly his 3rd mission as an experienced pilot, so therefore being able to have better results when shooting, etc. 1 victory means that to become a veteran, a pilot must successfully have 1 victory. It's not enough to fly around to become better. He has to destroy something first. The yellow boxes can only be marked off if the pilot destroyed at least 1 ground target or an enemy plane. If he didn't destroy anything until then, he can rise above experienced pilot level. And 5 victories means that to become an ace, a pilot has to be a determined, successful fighter. He must destroy 5 aerial or ground targets in any combination to be able to mark off the red box for aces after finishing a mission. If a pilot is capable of earning 5 skills earlier, let's say in his 2nd flown mission, he still has to gain experience by flying missions he just unlocked the requirement to become ace later on. Each fighter ace receives randomly an ace ability, a d6 roll for determination, and after 5 additional victories he rolls a new possible skill and can choose to take the level 2 ability of the previously rolled ability or a new one. There are several different personal fires for fighter pilots, piloting fighters and fighter bombers for bomber crew and airship crew, etc. They all have the same logic but a different ace skills collection. A bomber crew can only pilot a bomber, an airship crew can only pilot an airship, and a fighter pilot only a fighter or a fighter bomber. Pilot or crew experience has a lot of effect in the game. More experienced pilots or crews have an advantage for moving after inexperienced ones, allowing them to position themselves better in a more favorable position. They also pass their skill checks more easily, and last but not least, they score more easily hits on inexperienced pilots or crews. Aircraft datasheets. Each aircraft, whether fighter, bomber, airship or dogfighter, has its own datasheet. While these differ from plane to plane, they all follow the same logic. The individual areas, such as weapons, etc., are explained later when we're going to discuss about the combat and movement sections, but at this point it's important that all information relating to the aircraft is recorded on this documented aircraft sheet. So for example, here we have the Dornier 335 L3 Arrow. It has all the information that you want to see. It has a maximum speed of 8, minimum speed of 2, engine power 2, agility level very high, and the price as well. Also has various information about structure points, weapons that they carry with the attack dice, the damage, etc. But also the special D6 critical damage that can be assigned to it once it takes damage, and the various bombs that they can carry. At the start of the scenario, each pilot or crew is assigned an aircraft, and this is done by sorting the pilot's file and the aircraft datasheet side by side in the pilot's handbook. These pages are only printed on the inside of the respective rulebook. The aircraft datasheets are attached to the subsequent pilot personal files with paper clips so that the blank pages can be seen when turning the pages in the rulebook. And this is how you going to pick your pairs of different pilots and different aircraft from the ones available. Turns and game phases. Each scenario or game of Dogfighters is played for a certain amount of turns according to the scenario setup. A turn consists of 3 phases always: a moving phase, a combat phase, and a weather phase, and each phase has sub-phases. For the phase 1 movement, we have 1.1 aerial cruise missiles ACM movement, which will go first, then 1.2 ground target movement, 1.3 airship movement, and 1.4 fighter bomber, fighter dogfighter movement. Once all the movement has been done, then we go to phase 2, which is combat. First we have the 2.1 ground targets firing and the 2.2 following with all others fire. And last but not least we have phase 3 with 3.1 weather changes and cloud movement, and 3.2 move up to the turn counter and change of initiative. Then we check for end conditions. The scenario ends if the turn counter is placed on place 13 or if one player has lost the game. If not, we start a new turn with the phase 1 again, followed by phase 2 and phase 3 respectively. So a few words about each of the phases one by one, starting with phase 1. Phase 1 movement. First of all, we have the aerial cruise missiles ACM movement. You move all ACMs 5 hexes straight ahead. After this movement, a d6 is rolled, and if the result equals the number of turns, the ACM is already underway or lower than the ACM guiding system. Let's say it's somehow distracted, and if it is lost, and then removed with no further effect, that means that the missile just fails. Exceptions to this are the Hurricanes and the Aurora ACMs. These aren't lost in that case, but detonate, and the effects will be listed in the respective weapon section of the rulebook. So once we have sorted all the aerial cruise missiles movement, probably trying to aim some enemy aircraft and bring it down, then we move to the ground target movement. In the game, besides the things that they fly above the ground, and we have various airships and aircraft and various fighter bombers and dogfighters, etc. There are various things that they are on the ground phase. Either they can be flak batteries, large buildings, an armored vehicle, various targets, trucks, etc. So all these may have the possibility to move it depending on the various things that are involved in the scenario. So at the first movement, you determine for each movable target initial direction by using the diagram that has, let's say, I think there should be some kind of play rate for this, but this side means 1, this means 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I'm here, for me 1 is north and 4 is south respectively. So when you have something moving, so let's say we have a light armored vehicle moving, you roll a d6, and depending if it is 1 or 2, that means that the direction will change to this direction respectively. If it is a 3 or 4, it will be the same direction, moving in a straight line, and if it is a 5 or 6, it will change to the right respectively for moving purposes. So all this happens for all ground target movements. You determine their movement and their direction by using this philosophy, and once all ground target movements have been moved, then we proceed with the next step and the airships movement and fighter bombers after that. So we have the airship movement and the fighter bombers, fighters and dogfighters movement as a last moving step. The aircraft movement of aircrafts is separated in 2 phases. For airship movement, which are the big, huge and really nice, by the way, airships that you can find, which are amazing, and they have also additional rules. They have the various things that you can modify them with different abilities and different, let's say, guns and cannons and things that give you extra abilities. For example, the radar gives the ability for each player who is flying on a radius of 6 hexes to have, since they communicate with the radar, to have one pilot skill level up. So instead of green, they become more experienced, etc. So all sorts of cool things like that. I'm not going to go into detail. They can be explained in the rulebook and give a lot of customization to the game, which is one of the things I really like about this as well. But in phase 1.3, if we have airships, then we have their movement at this stage before fighter bombers, fighters and dogfighters, which happens in the next stage. Once this has been done, then we apply the same rules to the fighter bombers, fighter dogfighters section. Now, whether it's airships or fighter bombers in their respective sub-phase 1.3 and 1.4, all aircraft in ascending order move in ascending order with their pilot's experience. So first we have the green. So this is a green, and you can see with this very nice construction which alters the altitude with the magnets, which is really, really cool. But also the speed, you indicate the speed with this dial. you also have this slot which shows a green pilot. When you have a more experienced pilot, you change colors and you replace this, let's say, inner circle with the respective high level experience marking. But the idea is for the movement here, we start with all aircraft. First all the green will move, then all the blue, which is the experience, then all the yellow, which are the veterans, and last will be all the red, which are the aces. Within an experience level, the squadron leader who does not have the initiative that turn moves one of his aircraft, followed by the squadron leader who holds the initiative, etc., until all planes of that specific tier of experience have moved. Then aircraft of the next higher level of pilot experience move. In this case, if we start with green, we move to blue, etc. We always start with the lowest experience on the board. And once all experience have moved according to the same logic, then all the movement phases has been completed. Moving aircrafts. At the start of a movement, the pilot, the player, decides if the aircraft keeps its speed or if it accelerates with engine power or decelerates, engine power +1. With this new adjustment speed, the aircraft moves. All speed changes due to climbs, dives or turns come into effect at the end of the movement. And every airplane has values that show how to move, and these are described on their respective aircraft or airship datasheet. We have the airspeed, the maximum distance an aircraft can travel in hexes. An airplane can lower its speed by turning, increasing speed when descending or losing speed when climbing, so keep that in mind, you may use it for your tactical advantage. You have the minimum airspeed. This is the minimum speed that an aircraft must be flying at the end of their movement after the adjustment of the speed changes due to maneuvers, e.g. after a climb. If an aircraft falls below this value, it goes into tailspin and crashes. So you have to maintain the minimum airspeed at all costs, otherwise your airplane will crash. If it is considered then crashed, fallen into tailspin, then it's considered destroyed and the pilot can try to bail out the aircraft with a pilot check. So again, going to the information you have on your respective selected, let's say, fighter or bomber or whatever, you see how the maximum speed, the minimum speed, the engine power and the agility. These are really important because they depict the way you can maneuver your airplane. You have also seen the engine power. The amount of speed that an aircraft can change at the beginning of its movement in hexes, it's linked with the engine power. You can always decelerate faster than accelerate, and then the decelerate value is always engine power +1. So that means the engine power affects, of course, the amount of change you can do at the beginning of your movement in hexes. The amount of speed that you can change essentially, and then this will affect also your movement in hexes. We also seen that the information depicts agility. Agility indicates how early in its movement an aircraft can initiate a turn and how often it can turn in the course of its movement. Let's have a closer look. The higher the value, the earlier the aircraft can turn and the more turns it can make in addition. In general, the turning circle decreases with greater agility. This movement table shows all the movements that follow the logic of this movement principle. So you see you can have very low agility, medium, high, very high and extreme. And then again you see, of course, the different iconography depicting the end point, the starting point and the middle. So depending on the agility level that you have, you can either maneuver your aircraft, let's say, more frequently, both, for example, when you have a high agility and extreme agility, you can maneuver it at the beginning of your turn, in the middle of your turn, second turn, and in the third turn. So this is really important because it gives you a lot of flexibility, because also it dictates the direction you'll take, how easily you can get behind firing arc of tailing another aircraft that you're pursuing, etc. So whether you have low agility, you have to keep moving in a straight line, and then at the end you can change your direction, which is very, very limited, as you can imagine. Here you can have also special maneuvers like a Immelmann or barrel roll. We have this special pattern that they explain, but it's important because in any case, even the basic movement table, it has to be thought very well when you're trying to use specific aircraft with specific agility at the moment, or trying to increase it with some modifications later to a specific task. At the beginning of a movement, the pilot decides whether to accelerate up to his maximum engine power, less, keep the same speed, or even decelerate his speed. With the resulting new speed that is modified onto the base with a dial, the new value, then you have your movement. The movement is done using the movement template from which the aircraft qualifies. An aircraft whose ability is very high can perform all movements from very low to very high. However, the pilot must choose which one to use and move. Agility can be affected by damage, critical damage, or even effects like extreme external loading, etc. Another important thing to remember is that you have reduction of speed due to turning. Every turn, including a drift, reduces the speed of an aircraft by -1 at the end of its movement phase. That means for example, where a pilot adjusts his speed at the end of his movement phase by -2 if he has performed, for example, 2 turns. You can also have a climb and dive situation. At any point within a turn can be made, either left or right. The pilot can also climb or dive an altitude level at the same time. Each climbing maneuver, of course, reduces the speed by -1 and adds 1 altitude level to the base, so making the miniature sitting higher. And each dive maneuver increases the speed by +1 and reduces 1 altitude level. The speed additions or reductions are also adjusted at the end of the movement phase. You can also have landing. To land an aircraft, it must be at the level 1 and fly straight ahead at the minimum speed without turning. At the end of the movement phase, it is considered to have landed. You can also take off on a mission. To start an aircraft, it is moved at a mission speed and positioned at the altitude of 1. A starting movement may only take place in a straight line. At the end of the movement phase, the aircraft is considered to have taken off and it is now airborne. You can have increased agility. The pilot can decide to use his aircraft beyond the agility that is built for and trying to go for a better situation of agility. If he does so, he can use the next higher level of agility. So if he is at high agility, he can try to use, for example, the very high tier. He has to pass the pilot check skill to avoid damage. If the roll fails, the plane takes a critical damage. You can also be flying low. Every aircraft that moves at altitude 1 and flies faster than speed of 3 must pass a pilot check. If it succeeds, everything is okay. If it fails, the aircraft collides with an obstacle and is destroyed, killing the pilot. Fighter bombers are not affected by this rule because their job is to fly low, of course. Just to show you an idea of altitude, since we're here, let me show you this diagram that you can see that you have landed at 0 level with 1 peg, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5 is the highest of the altitudes that you can have. And this shows really nice all the different altitudes. Speaking of altitudes, aircraft can operate at different altitudes in Dogfighter. There are 5 levels, as I said, and level 1 is special because level 1 means close to the ground and requires a special caution from the pilot, or he runs the risk of crashing on a ground object. All other altitude levels are harmless, but will affect combat. Planes can also increase or decrease an altitude level at any point in their movement when you can make a turn. The corresponding changes in speed are adjusted or subtracted at the end of the movement. So let's see a simple example. Let's say we have a pilot 1 which has a speed of 4 and an altitude of 2. You can see the altitude of 2 here because it has 2 pegs, or a 2 level 1 or 2 single ones. And then you have a respective speed of 4, and you mark the speed by putting this dial to indicate the speed. So it is 4. It is facing this way. Okay, so this is the starting position. And also let's say that his movement speed, he would like to accelerate by 1 at the beginning of his movement, so his new movement speed is adjusted and it's becoming 5. So let's say it goes to speed 5 by turning this dial to number 5. So now his speed is 5 and his new movement will be 5, and the pilot 1 controls an aircraft with a mobility high. Just to show you again the profile of mobility high, you see you can make a turn during your first turn, and then you cannot make turn during half your movement, round up, which is the second tier. So start hex, half movement round up, end hex. So again, high means that you can make a turn at your start hex, then you cannot make any modifications in the middle when you fly, and then at your end turn you can also make a turn. So his profile is high. That means that he's starting like that, and what he does with a speed of 5 is he will move 5 spaces. So he has a profile of high, so he can turn left because he starts with a high agility profile. Move 1, 2, 3, as you can see. He cannot turn anymore, and then he can do 4, 5, and he can either change his facing like that or change his facing like that, which is not really a good, I would say, approach. Just go and sit in front of an enemy, right? So let's see that he still has the previous scenario, so he has adjusted his speed to 5, and since his agility profile is high, he wants to do something better. He wants to do a very high profile, which means he likes to change his positioning in the middle of his turn, round up, so he can better position himself, supposedly. So he can try to do that, but he has to pass a pilot skill check, and let's assume that he did pass it. Okay, so then he can make with 1, 2, 3, turn in the middle, 4, 5, and try to let's say try to circle around or move around or bypass his opponent or whatever his tactical opinion would be, plan. Now, phase 2 combat. First of all, we have 2.1, which is a ground targets fire. All armed ground targets fire simultaneously and select the nearest enemy aircraft as a target. In case of a draw, you roll a die to determine the target, and the hit check, an effect following the ground target weapons parameters, is explained later. So then all others fire, which is essentially our aircraft as well. This is where the fame is generated. Shooting down enemy aircraft brings fame to the winner. The destruction of ground target is also important to qualify for fame win as part of the mission, but it does not gain you fame in the middle of the mission. So shooting down enemy with anything with wings, let's put it simplistically, is where the action takes place. Aircrafts, no matter if airship, fighter, fighter bomber, or bomber dogfighter, etc., attack each other in the sequence of experience. So this is a reverse experience. So first we have the aces attacking, then we have the veterans, the yellow, then we have the experience, the blue, and then we have the green, the less experienced among all. So first aces, then veterans, experienced pilots, and finally the green boys. The squadron leader who lost the initiative that turn opens fire with one of his aircraft first, followed by the squadron leader who won the initiative, and so on until all aircraft of that experience level have resolved their attacks. Each fight takes place at the same time within an experience level. Only then can pilots of the next lower level of experience fight their battles until all battles have been resolved. So it is obvious that it's quite possible actually that an ace shoots down a green boy before he can even have a chance to defend himself. Also, two aces shoot down each other at the same time, if that's the scenario, because they are considered to shooting each other simultaneously within the same experience level. So how shooting takes place? The enemy is in sight and the range is perfect, so the weapons are loaded and it's time to fire. We have the fire arcs. The opposing aircraft must be in the fire arc of the weapon, and most weapons use the front arc, which is the one I'm going to show you now. So supposedly this is your aircraft. So you see it has a very broad fire arc, which has 3 different tiers. So it's the green one, 1 to 3 hex away in all directions that you can see, specifically this pattern. Then the yellow one, 4, 5, 6, which is second tier. And then you have the red one, which is very far away, 7, 8, and 9, which is the red one. Sorry, the red one, which is the most away, which is actually in the outer part. If there is an opposing aircraft in the area which is green, it is considered to be on short distance. So 1, 2, 3, on this direction, all those 1, 2, 3 from your starting position is close, short distance. If they're on the next 4, 5, 6 yellow, let's say arc, that means that they are on medium distance, and if they are on the lower 7, 8, 9 red arc, then they're considered to be at long distance. Of course, this determines the number of attack dice. This is a short, medium, or long, which uses the different number of attack dice depending on the weapon profile that you'll see later. You can also have rear arc of aircraft that you can see at the behind part of the aircraft, and you can also have special arcs like the top turret, which is 360 degrees of fire. They fire all around. You have the top, same altitude and higher, or the down, same altitude and lower. So these are the different profiles of fire arcs that they have used in the game. And you have hit modifiers, air targets. The basic target number is always 6. A 6 is always a hit even if the modifiers go beyond 6. A 1, on the other hand, is always a failure even if the modifiers allowed 1 or less. Some weapons require a reroll. For example, successful hit rolls must be confirmed by rerolling each successful hit again against the original determined target numbers, and every hit determined in this way is actually a hit that can lead to damage. Weapons which need a reroll to hit that fire at targets which are easy to hit and allow a reroll or fails due to the easy rule of zeppelins and bombers, for example, must not reroll hits or fails. This is simply an ordinary attack with no rerolls. So, firing at easy targets. If the target is an airship, it's quite big, you can see, and the same goes for a bomber. It is much easier to hit those targets because of their sheer size. Therefore, every missed attack can be rerolled and the second roll is valid. A weapon that needs a reroll to hit, like a Nebelwerfer, for example, rocket, doesn't reroll misses or hits. It's just a simple attack with just one attack roll per dice. You could be firing at clouds. These are the clouds that you have in the game, and they affect different things, both in terms of attacking opportunities, but also they can damage aircraft, as we have said before. And they also move depending with the weather change, which is a phase of the game. But if the firing path crosses a hex of a cloud, the attack dice per weapon are reduced by -1 per hex. So if you want to shoot all the way from across 1, 2, then you're going to have -2 in your total reduction, which is not good, right? In case of bombing through clouds, you have -2 dice. So to hit modifier table, the hit modifier table describes what happens with aerial targets. I'm just going to show you briefly, and you have also play rates for all this, so you don't have to memorize them, of course. You have situations where your modifier, the base to hit is 6, and then you have experience, -3 to +3 with the difference in experience level between attacker and defender. You can have tailing, so you have a -1 modifier, so you have to be within 6 hexes of the rear arc of the target, and within his 6 hexes the attacker's front arc. That means that you qualify to do a tailing, which gives you better chance to hit them because you are having them on your crosshairs, for example. Higher position, -1, attacker in a higher position than the target. Head to head, that's +1, the attacker and the target are both in their respective front arc. Or dogfighter, if the target is a dogfighter, it's harder to hit and you have also -1. So there you have it. This is, for example, the aerial targets hit modifier table, the basic one. You could also have different altitudes, because you have seen in the game it's all about altitude, and you have different heights all the way from 1 to 5, from 0 when you're landing to 1 to 3, 4 or 5 when you're flying high. In most cases, the higher you fly, the better it is. You can attack an opponent who flies higher or lower than you, but just make sure that the maximum altitude difference is not greater than the distance from the enemy. For example, an opponent at a distance of 2 from the attacker, but the difference in altitude is 3, so the attack cannot take place. An opponent, if it is in a distance of 4 from the attacker, but the difference in altitude is 3, the attack can be carried out normally. What about tailing? Tailing is important because then you try to get the advantage on the modifier, but also be more successful against your target. You could have different experience levels. Pilots of different experience levels are easier to or harder to hit. An experienced pilot will find it easier to hit a more inexperienced pilot, because they are more predictive on their movements and simply have more experience on aerial combat. The hit roll is modified with experience. To do this, relative difference in the experience of both pilots is compared. So 2 green pilots have ±0 because both have the same experience. And experienced pilot fires at the green pilot, -1 to hit because the attacker is 1 experience level better. And so on. So you can imagine that aces or more experienced pilots will have better successes against inexperienced pilots. You also have modifiers for ground targets. I'm not going to go into detail, but just going to show you the hit modifier table for the ground targets. For example, the base to hit is 6, fighter bomber -1 for all fighter bombers conducting a ground attack, bombers and airships -1 for bombers and airships conducting ground attack, experience 0 to -3, green pilot 0, experienced pilot -1, veteran -2, and ace -3. So an ace will hit on 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 respectively, instead of just 6s. Moving +1, a moving target is always harder to hit. Each successful roll results in a damage roll according to the used weapon, and you have to see the weapon table to determine the details respectively. But this is how attacking on ground targets works. Now, regardless of your target, an important aspect of the game is the weapons. Every aircraft has a fixed number of weapons such as light and heavy machinery, guns, light and heavy cannons, so-called onboard weapons, and the onboard weapons are the heart of every combat aircraft. In addition to aircrafts can carry a certain number of external weapons, but they can have also loadout points, and they can have also added values depending on the added weapons they carry. Almost all weapons have the same following damage values. I'm going to show you again the table that takes effect, and you see light machine gun has a damage of 6, 1 damage point at a roll of 6. Heavy machine gun hits at 5 plus, that means 1 damage point on a roll of 5 or higher. Light cannon, it's 4 plus / 6, that means that you have 1 damage point at a roll of 4 and higher, and 2 damage points if you hit a 6. Wow. And then the heavy cannons have 3 plus, 5 and 6. That means if you hit 3 or more, you do 1 damage point. If you hit 2 damage, you do 2 damage points if you do a 5 result, and 3 damage points if you roll the 6. So this makes it more critical. Weapons described on board the weapon that you're carrying. That means that whether you have light or heavy machine guns or light or heavy cannons, you'll know it because it's part of your aircraft. The number of attack dice describes the number of attack dice an aircraft has available when it shoots. The number of attack dice varying due to the number of weapons an aircraft is carrying. The 3 numbers that you see, followed by slashes, stands for short, medium, long range. You take a look at the aircraft datasheet for the attack dice, and then depending on the distance that you're trying to shoot, you can see how many dice you have to roll. The damage. The roll that it is necessary to cause a damage to the aircraft that got hit. Each successful roll of damage reduces the structure point of an aircraft by 1, and a random D1 critical damage is determined, which comes into effect immediately. You also have the fire disciplines. Every weapon runs out of ammunition at some point, however it is up to the pilot to manage the ammo he's carrying. Experienced pilots are more sensitive to it than inexperienced pilots, as you would imagine, and those green pilots tend to be more I would say jumpy or nervous, or with their fingers on the fire weapon, so they can spend more easily run out of ammunition. Just to give you an idea on another table, for example, you see this is the light machine guns and have 3 numbers. That means that on a short range you roll 3 dice, on a middle range you roll 1 die, and on a long range you don't roll any die. You cannot fire with a light machine gun when you are firing at 7, 8 or 9 hexes away. The damage is 6, and here is the fire discipline. And the same, you see heavy cannon, for example, has better amount of dice and creates more damage respectively. So the number of attack dice depends on the number of weapons that are indicated on the aircraft sheet, and cannons have 2 or even 3 damage levels because they can do a lot more damage. You also have the table with the fire disciplines, which depending on the weapon type, light machine gun, heavy machine gun, light cannon or heavy cannon, and the experience of the pilot, green experience, veteran or aces, you have different numbers that they can affect the fire discipline, which is essentially a check to see if you exhausted your ammo after firing each attack. So in detail, after each attack, whether successful or not, the pilot must take a fire discipline roll and pass. If at least the required value is reached, the fire discipline is held and no further effects take place. If the roll fails, the pilot has miscalculated or simply left the thumb on the trigger for too long. Whether panic, despair or wrong calculation, the ammunition is running out. In the white box, you write off the fire discipline roll that is necessary depending on the onboard weapon and the pilot's experience rating. And if the first fire discipline roll fails, the yellow box is checked. Half of the ammunition on board has been used up and there is no further effect. If the roll is successful at a later point again in the game, during a next attack with onboard weapons, the red box is marked, the ammunition has been depleted, and the aircraft can no longer use the onboard weapons when it's firing for this scenario. You could also have external loadout, depending on the scenario. You can bring more weapons on it, which can affect, of course, the dice that you roll, etc., or bombs that you can drop, depending on the mission, so I'm not going to go into that. You have the damage, and each time an aircraft gets damaged, it loses a structure point that will be crossed off the aircraft datasheet. When the aircraft crosses off the yellow section, it counts as damage. It drops 1 agility level for the rest of the mission, and its maximum speed is reduced by 1. And if the red section is crossed off, the aircraft is destroyed and the pilot or crew must bail out. If the damage received is greater than the structure points remaining, than the pilot or the crew check, then the amount of excess damage will be taken. So this is important because essentially you can end up with your aircraft destroyed, and then not only having less aircraft for you, but also giving more fame points to your opponent. A word about external loadout and bombs. Here's just the different type of external loadout that you can have. I'm not going to go into detail because this you'll find them more and more in the more advanced scenarios as you move on the more complex missions. So you can have no external loadout at the beginning, but you can see you can have AB-2250 bombs, you can have cluster smokes, ATA missiles, Puncher Shrek, ATG rockets, magnetic missiles, short whale, hurricane and aurora. And all these have different types of denomination, if they're bomb or aerial cruise missile, etc. They have attack dice, damage and special abilities. And of course everything is explained, but you don't have to know everything unless you're carrying an external loadout and unless you're more experienced to do so, because at the first scenarios you are not dealing with external bombs and external weapons. The last phase, phase 3, is the weather. First, weather changes and cloud movement. The weather changes and cloud movement occurs, and this is always handled by the player who actually holds the initiative. You roll a d6 to determine weather and wind condition changes. If it is a 1, the weather gets 1 grade better, as example from broken to clear skies. If it is a 6, the weather gets 1 degree worse. In no case it can get better than clear skies or worse than thunderstorm. The same die reroll determines the wind direction changes. And here is an example of how this is explained. You see on a 1, 2 the wind changes to the left, 3, 4 remains the same, and 5, 6 same like before, it changes to the right. And the roll 6 determines the wind speed. So you see you have clear skies, so no hexes, broken, rain and thunderstorm. And this affects both the direction but also the movement of the clouds. And you keep in mind that clouds can have various effects for pilots, either by they can even cause the planes, the aircraft to be destroyed, but also they reduce the ability to hit efficiently and damage your opponents, etc. So you can fly, depending on the weather, you can fly above or below some clouds, and depending on your altitude, but not if the weather is, for example, if you have rain and above. Both players move the clouds in the determined positions and take care of the corresponding effects, depending on the weather. The wind speed on the table that I just showed you defines how many tiles they move straight into the wind direction that was indicated. And if a cloud leaves, at least partially, it is repositioned at the opposing edge of the map by the player who holds the initiative. The cloud must somehow touch the edge of the map. Anything else is up to the squadron leader to decide respectively. Now if the weather is broken clouds start at height level 1 or 2, and 2 is the highest level high for this type of weather. So it ends up at a height level 3. It has no negative, so two height levels is the height in total, so from level 1 to level 3. So it has no negative effect if you fly through those clouds, but they grant cover against if somebody is shooting through clouds. So you can fly above, below or through them. Rain, if the weather is depicted as rain, it is raining, the clouds reach out for all altitude levels, not only from 2 to 3. That means that the rain cloud cannot be flown under or above, only through. You have also thunderstorm. If it is a thunderstorm, the clouds reach out for all altitude levels, not only from 2 to 3. That means that a cloud that can be flown under or above. And additionally, each time a plane is flying in a thunder cloud, the pilot has to make a pilot check, as you would imagine, to avoid critical damage from thunders. If it fails, the plane receives critical damage. Wind speed of 3. Wind speed of 3 means that there are squalls. If a plane gets caught in a cloud at wind speed of 3, it will be moved 1 hex in the direction of the cloud is moving. Also, each time a plane is caught in the cloud in that manner, the pilot has to make a pilot check to avoid critical damage. If he fails, the plane receives 1 critical damage like before. Then you count up turn order and you change the initiative. You move up the counter by 1 to the next round, forward, and you give the initiative over to the next player so that they can keep the initiative. And this affects, of course, what we discussed so far. Now, there you have it. These are the basic things that you need to know about Dogfighters The Ale Wars. This is a very, very well thought and interesting game with lots of things that are going on, but you don't have to learn everything from the beginning. You can start from an easy scenario, use the basic rules and start playing. Of course, then when you get into more details, a lot of things that are there take their toll, in a good way. You have the pilot skill and the crew skills. You have the airship rules. When you have airships, you have structure points that they're modified accordingly. And then you can have combat with airships, which like they can take a lot of damage, but they're more hard to make them drop and to win them, to destroy them essentially. You can have the modifications of the airship, which are these things that I've shown you that you attach to the airship. Of course, the airship has its own stand and its own details, but I'm just running out of stands at the moment. So you have the different modifications that you can add to the airship, and this allow your airship to have additional useful abilities. I mentioned already, for example, the radar. You can have a jammer. You can have dogfighters launching from clamps from your airship and attacking the enemy. Lots of things going on, and here's what's the arc for the airships. You can also have, this game can also be played as a solo, and you can also have boats, so non-player aircraft that are controlled by the game itself with this specific routine. And then you can have rules for setting up your scenario, setting up the weather before you begin, setting up your ground targets, and then your missions. And here are the different scenarios. You see all this, you have aerial dominance, fighter sweep, aerial surveillance, reconnaissance escort, agents insertion, the big hunt, the great air raid, bomb run, cargo airship escort, the flying ace, and you see the duel, etc. And then once you get familiar with the game and the basic rules, you can do a campaign, and you can also have a very interesting campaign on following sessions against each other or against as a solo as well. You have these are the different type of aircraft that you see in the core game. You have also different personal pilots, crew documents that I've shown you at the beginning of this video. And then your fighter ace skills that are really nice, eagle eyes, +1 to hit rolls, +1 damage rolls on the level 2, etc. So all these things are waiting for us to unlock them and explore them, and they give a lot of variety in the game. So obviously you can see that this is a game very well thought, with a lot of variability, a lot of ways to play it, and a lot of things that are going on. And you also have the campaign that you can have, the introductory campaign with all these scenarios, 6, the versus campaign with all these 9 scenarios, and the solitary co-op campaign. So this game has so much value in it. If you're into miniature games and if you like this type of gaming, both from execution point of view and from design point of view, I think the game offers so much material here. So I'm going to stop here just to come back up and give you my final thoughts from the sessions I've had from Dogfighters The Ale Wars. Very, very impressed with this game. I have to admit, this is not a game that I would expect that it would impress me that much. First of all, I really enjoyed the different ideas that they were crafted into the design. I don't know how many years the designer is working on the game. It looks like he has done a lot of work, so it must be a lot of time. The altitude level is really nice, because altitude plays a role and it's thematic. I mean, you cannot be flying all aircraft, they're not flying on the same height. We can play war games and we can play miniature games, and we have them all on standees and they fly it, but this is not the reality. In reality, there is a third dimension, and the third dimension gives height, and this is really, really captured in this game. Different altitude, different height gives a more realistic, in my opinion, experience of such a game. Because it brings this element, not only the 3D, or how they look cool on standees and bases, and you know, give you a very nice, by the way, eye candy effect on your table, but from a gameplay point of view, the altitude plays a lot of role on the game, and I really like it. The same way I like the weather, because I know weather usually in those type of games can be a bummer, you know, like hitting, I don't know, a meteor or a sandstorm, or I don't know, a sun or thunderstorm or whatever. But in this game, there was weather, and in that era, I can imagine, not only the pilots had to deal with different experienced pilots, different aircraft, like it makes sense, but they also had to deal with the weather, because they were not always flying on a clear weather, and this is really captured nice in the game, and I liked it. It gave me the impression, at least with the first sessions I had from the game, and I'm really looking forward to explore it more, of a game that has a lot of value. and I haven't even scratched the surface of this value, because this game can offer so much gameplay with the different campaigns and the different missions and the different play styles, etc. And you can build your own squadron, and you can do 1 million things once you get very familiar with the game. But you can also start very simple. You just have a few airship and a few aircraft, fight against each other or fight a solo session, and then try the game out. And then I believe the opportunities that they arise from the differentiation that you're going to do on your aircraft, the selection of your crew, flying crew members and your pilots, your craft, your modifications on your airship, the different campaigns and the different missions, that you can see that they go all over the place, not from just shooting each other it will make sense as a primary target, but landing aircraft, fighting specific, destroying specific ground targets, escorting someone, etc. So it's really, really nice, and I think the designer has put a lot of love in the game. But you can also see that from the execution of the prototype. This is a gorgeous prototype, and I can really not wait to see what they will do with the final production game. Now, if you want to find out more about the game, check out the description. In the description of this video, you'll find the link to the Kickstarter page where you can follow up Dogfighters The Ale Wars. It's already funded, and this is a huge success for the campaign and for the designer. I'm applauding him. But go and find out more about the game. This is a really, really nice package, and it has a lot of gameplay for us to discover and a lot of clever ideas that are executed well as well. So this is Dogfighters The Ale Wars.